My name is Elena Reyes. But at my brother's wedding last spring, I was just Riley, the quiet sister from out of town who asked for water with lemon instead of champagne. I was standing at the bar under that big white tent in Charleston when I heard it. The whisper came from right behind me, sharp enough to cut through the string quartet and the low hum of Southern laughter. Trust me, women like her never outrank anybody. Her voice was sweet on the surface, the kind of tone that makes you think she's just sharing harmless gossip. But I knew better. I've spent 23 years in the Navy learning how to read the room before it even knows it's being read. I didn't turn around right away. Instead, I kept my fingers wrapped around the cold glass, feeling the condensation slip down like the slow drip of old memories. My left knee was throbbing from the long flight out of Norfolk, a souvenir from a mission I still don't talk about. 2 ibuprofen in my hotel room 20 minutes earlier, and still the ache reminded me I wasn't 25 anymore. Vanessa, my new sister-in-law's older sister, kept going. Look at her. Pretty enough to get invited, but not important enough to be introduced properly. Probably married some officer for the benefits and now plays dress-up at family events. The woman beside her gave a nervous little laugh. I could feel their eyes on my back, scanning my dark green dress that hugged a little tighter around the middle than it used to. No medals. No uniform. Just me trying to blend in so my brother Marcus could have his perfect day. If you've ever stood in a room full of people who are supposed to love you and still felt completely invisible, I see you. I was right there with you that night. The air smelled like salt from the harbor, fresh roses and expensive perfume. Patriots Point loomed in the distance, that old aircraft carrier sitting dark and proud against the twilight sky. Felt fitting somehow. I'd spent years on ships like that, making decisions that kept people alive while the world back home kept spinning without me. I took a slow sip of water. Cold. Tart from too much lemon. Just like the moment. Vanessa stepped closer. I caught the powdery scent of her perfume, the kind that costs more than a month's groceries for some families. She's harmless, she whispered loud enough for me to hear. Women like that never really outrank anyone. That one almost made me smile. Not because it was funny, but because life has a cruel sense of timing. Right then, the groom's father, General Harlan Brooks, a 4-star Marine who still carried command in every line of his shoulders, turned from a group of older officers. His eyes swept across the tent and landed on me. His glass of champagne stopped halfway to his lips. The conversation around him faded. The quartet kept playing, but even the music seemed to hold its breath. Captain Reyes? His voice carried across the space, calm but unmistakable. The tent grew quieter. Not completely silent. Weddings never go fully quiet. But the kind of hush that happens when everyone realizes something important is unfolding. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. General Brooks. He took a step forward, then another, studying my face like he was confirming a memory from years ago. "I'll be damned," he said softly. "They didn't tell me you were family." Vanessa went very still behind me. I could almost hear her recalculating. This is where the story really begins. Not with the whisper, but with what happened when someone who actually knew what I was worth walked into the room. I remember thinking in that moment how strange it was, how one person's recognition could shift the entire atmosphere. I had driven down from Norfolk alone, no +1, no fanfare. Just a woman in a dress trying to celebrate her little brother's new beginning without casting any shadows. But shadows have a way of following you when you've lived the kind of life I have. The harbor breeze carried the faint scent of diesel and blooming magnolias. Somewhere nearby, laughter bubbled up from a group of Marcus's contractor friends. They were talking about roof pitches and material costs, the kind of everyday talk that used to make me feel both nostalgic and distant at the same time. You know that feeling? When you're surrounded by family but still feel like a guest in your own story. That's exactly where I stood, glass in hand, heart steady from years of practice. General Brooks hadn't moved. His presence commanded attention without trying. And in the space between his words and Vanessa's frozen silence, I felt something quiet but powerful settle in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Just the calm before a long overdue reckoning. If this already feels familiar, that moment when your own family sees you as just the sister, while the outside world sees something entirely different. Stick with me. Because what came next changed how I saw myself and how they saw me. That moment with General Brooks hung in the air like the Charleston humidity, thick, heavy, and impossible to ignore. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to take you back a little. Not too far. Just enough so you understand why a simple wedding invitation felt like walking into a minefield I had mapped out years ago. My name is Elena Reyes, but to my family in Texas I've always been Riley, the older sister who left home at 19 and never really came back the same. Marcus, my little brother, was the golden one. He stayed in San Antonio, built a successful construction company from the ground up, married Emily in a big Southern wedding, and gave my parents the kind of life they could post about on Facebook. I was the one who called on birthdays from whatever time zone the Navy sent me to. They knew I was in the military. They knew I worked somewhere important in Norfolk, but they didn't know the half of it. And honestly, I stopped trying to explain a long time ago. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes when your own family loves you, but doesn't really see you. I grew up in a modest brick house on the outskirts of San Antonio. Dad worked construction until his back gave out. Mom kept the house running on sheer willpower and prayer. Marcus was the charmer, the athlete, the one who could fix anything with his hands. I was the quiet reader, the one who joined JROTC because it gave me structure when everything at home felt like it was slowly unraveling. If you've ever been the child who had to grow up faster than everyone else just to hold the family together in ways they never noticed, type scene in the comments. I see you. Marcus and I were close once. Really close. When his business almost collapsed after those brutal hailstorms back in 2018, I was the one he called at 2:17 a.m. His voice was shaking in a way I'd never heard from my confident little brother. Payroll was due in 2 days. The bank had frozen his line of credit. 15 employees depended on him. He didn't ask for money right away. He just said he didn't know what to do. I wired him $48,000 before sunrise. No hesitación. That was my entire deployment bonus from the year before, plus some savings I've been putting away for a house I still don't own. He promised he'd pay it back. I told him to make sure his guys got paid first. That was the last real conversation we had about my life for years. He built the company back stronger, got engaged to Emily, started posting pictures of family barbecues I was never able to attend, and somewhere along the way I became the successful but distant sister. The one who chose the Navy over family. The one who showed up in a nice dress but without a husband or kids to prove I was doing life right. Standing at that bar, listening to Vanessa dissect me like I was some charity case, I felt the weight of all those unspoken years. My dark green dress covered the small scar near my collarbone from a mission that still wakes me up some nights. The slight limp I was hiding? That came from a training accident 3 years ago that the Navy called minor. Nothing about my life looked minor to me. Vanessa didn't know any of that. She only saw a woman in her early 40s standing alone, no rank displayed, no obvious story. To her, I was competition not because of who I was, but because of what my presence threatened in her carefully built world. She had married into military circles through her connections, but she had never worn the uniform herself. And women like me, we make the ones who only stood beside the uniform feel uncertain. I kept my breathing steady the way they teach you in high-stress environments. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't let them see the first crack. The bartender, a young guy with kind eyes, slid me a fresh glass of water without me asking. Small mercies. Marcus was across the tent laughing with his new in-laws, looking happy in his Navy suit. He had put on a few pounds since we were kids, but he still had that same easy smile that could light up a room. When he hugged me earlier, he said, "Glad you made it, Ree. Means a lot." Then the photographer pulled him away and that was it. I didn't blame him. Weddings are chaos. But part of me wondered if he even remembered the 2 a.m. call anymore. That's the thing about family sometimes. They remember the version of you that fits their story. The quiet sister. The reliable one. The one who doesn't make waves. They don't always have room for the woman who made life or death decisions in windowless rooms halfway across the world. General Brooks was still watching me. I could feel Vanessa shifting uncomfortably behind me, her perfect smile probably starting to strain. The evening was just getting started. but something in the air had already changed. If you've ever carried silent sacrifices for people who never asked about the cost, you already know how heavy that invisible weight can feel. That hug from Marcus earlier in the evening had been warm, but it also felt distant, like we were both performing the roles our family had written for us. I smiled through it the way I've learned to smile through briefings where lives hang on every word. But inside I was already carrying the weight of everything I never said. Let me tell you about the real cost of staying quiet. It was late 2018. I was stationed in Bahrain, coming off a long rotation in intelligence ops. My phone rang at an ungodly hour. Marcus's voice cracked on the other end. I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to call. His construction company was drowning after back-to-back hailstorms destroyed half his jobs. Payroll deadline in 48 hours. Bank line of credit frozen. 15 families depending on him. I didn't hesitate. I transferred $48,000 from my deployment savings before the sun came up over the Persian Gulf. No contract, no repayment schedule. Just family. He thanked me through tears and promised it would never happen again. For a while things got better for him. The business recovered. He met Emily. Life moved forward. But that money was more than numbers on a screen. It was the down payment I had been saving for a small house near the base. It was the buffer I no longer had when my own medical bills from a knee injury started piling up. And it was the silence that followed because Marcus never brought it up again, and I never reminded him. Some debts in families aren't measured in dollars. If you've ever given everything to someone who later acted like it was nothing, you know how that kind of quiet generosity can slowly erode your peace. My life in the Navy wasn't the glamorous recruitment videos. As a captain in naval intelligence, I spent years in rooms with no windows, analyzing satellite feeds, intercepted communications, and making calls that affected entire teams on the ground. I missed my father's 60th birthday because I was in the middle of an operation we couldn't pause. I missed Marcus's college graduation. I missed holidays where my mom would sigh on the phone and say, "We understand you're busy, Mija," in that tone that really meant, "We wish you'd choose us instead." The scars I carry aren't all visible. There's the thin one near my collarbone from a classified incident I still can't discuss. There's the ache in my left knee that flares up after every long flight, a reminder of a training exercise gone wrong 3 years ago. The doctors called it manageable. I call it the price of showing up when others couldn't. Yet at family gatherings I was still just Riley, the single sister, the career woman who never settled down. They didn't know about the late nights I spent reviewing mission logs instead of dating profiles. They didn't know about the friends I lost overseas whose names I still say in quiet prayers. They didn't know that every promotion came with more responsibility and more distance from the life they understood. I chose this path at 19 because staying in San Antonio felt like drowning in expectations I could never meet. The Navy gave me purpose, structure, and a way to serve something bigger than myself. But it also taught me that excellence in uniform often comes at the cost of being misunderstood at home. Standing there at the bar that night, I realized how long I had been shrinking myself to make everyone else comfortable. I didn't wear my rank because I wanted Marcus's day to be about him. I didn't correct Vanessa because I was tired of proving my worth in rooms that should have known it already. The string quartet shifted into a softer melody. General Brooks was still watching me with that steady, knowing look only lifelong military men seem to master. Vanessa had gone quiet for the first time all evening, but I could feel her recalculating her next move. I took another sip of water and let the cold settle in my chest. Years of briefings had taught me one important truth. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply refusing to disappear. There's a kind of strength that grows in the silence, the kind that doesn't need applause. But that night, I was starting to wonder how much longer I could carry that silence alone. If you've ever hid in the hardest parts of your journey because your own people weren't ready to see them, you're not alone in that either. I was right there with you, knee aching, heart guarded, waiting for the moment everything would shift. And shift it did. The silence after General Brooks said my name didn't last long, but it felt eternal. I could sense Vanessa behind me, her body language shifting from smug confidence to something sharper, like a predator realizing the quiet mouse in the corner might actually have claws. Let me tell you about Vanessa. She wasn't some cartoon villain throwing drinks or causing scenes. She was far more dangerous than that. Smart, polished, and deeply insecure in a way that made her cruelty feel almost elegant. She had married into military-adjacent circles through family connections, but she had never served herself. Her identity was built on standing beside strong men, never being one of them. And when I showed up, quiet and unassuming, something in her world tilted. She recovered quickly that night, flashing a bright smile as she stepped up beside me. "Oh, you two know each other?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake warmth. "Riley, you never mentioned you knew the general." General Brooks didn't even glance at her. His eyes stayed on me. "Know her," he said, his deep voice carrying through the tent. "Captain Reyes helped bring one of my best men home safely. She's the reason my son is still here to meet his nephew." The words landed like a quiet explosion. Heads turned. Emily, Marcus's new wife, lowered her champagne flute. Marcus himself started walking over from across the tent, his smile fading into confusion. Vanessa's face stayed pleasant, but I watched the color drain from her cheeks in real time. That perfect southern smile tightened at the corners. She had spent the entire evening painting me as irrelevant, the distant sister, the woman who probably married for the pension. Now the most respected man in the room was calling me Captain Reyes with genuine respect in his voice. If you've ever watched someone who underestimated you suddenly realize they miscalculated, there's a strange satisfaction in it, but also a deep sadness. Because it shouldn't have taken a 4-star general for my own family to see me. Vanessa wasn't done though. That's what made her smart. She leaned in slightly, placing a light hand on my arm like we were old friends. "Well, Riley is very private about her work, isn't she?" She laughed softly, the sound landing wrong in the quiet space. "We're just so happy she could make it to the wedding." I looked down at her fingers on my sleeve, then back up calmly. She removed her hand. General Brooks narrowed his eyes just enough for me to know he had caught every subtle cut. Men like him notice everything, the micro-expressions, the power plays disguised as small talk. He had spent decades reading rooms where one wrong word could cost lives. Marcus finally reached us, looking between me and the general. What's going on?" he asked, his voice low. He still had that boyish confusion from our childhood. The same look he used to get when Mom and Dad fought and he'd hide in the garage pretending to organize tools. I kept my tone even. "General Brooks and I crossed paths professionally a few years ago." The general gave a low, dry chuckle. "That's one way to put it." He turned to the small crowd that had gathered. "Captain Reyes served with distinction. That's all anyone here needs to know unless she chooses to say more." His words shut down the questions before they could start. I appreciated that more than he'll ever know. I didn't want this night to become about me. I had come to celebrate Marcus, not rewrite family history in front of 200 guests. But Vanessa saw the shift, and it terrified her. Later that evening, as we moved toward the dinner tables, I noticed my place card had me seated near the back with distant relatives and a couple from Marcus's neighborhood. Not at the family table. Vanessa had helped with the seating chart. Emily had mentioned it casually earlier. Small moves, but they add up. I sat where I was assigned and ate quietly, listening to conversations about mortgage rates and college football. Normal life. The kind I rarely got to live anymore. My knee continued to throb under the table, a steady reminder of the body that had carried me through years of service. Vanessa circled like a shark in cream linen and pearls. Every time she passed, another quiet comment would land. "Some people make their whole personality about their job," she said once, loud enough for our table to hear. Another time, "Weddings should be about family, not resumes." I didn't respond. Not yet. I've learned that silence can be its own strategy, especially when your opponent is desperately trying to regain control of the narrative. If you've ever dealt with someone who feels threatened by your quiet strength, you know how exhausting it is to watch them poke and prod, hoping you'll finally snap and prove their point. That night, I refused to give her the reaction she wanted. Instead, I observed. I noted every microaggression. I stored them away like intelligence reports, because by the time brunch rolled around the next morning, I had already decided something important. I was done shrinking myself to protect other people's comfort. The harbor lights reflected on the water as the evening wound down. I slipped away early, drove back to my hotel through the light Charleston rain, and sat on the edge of the bed wondering how much longer I could keep carrying everyone else's version of me. Vanessa had seen a threat that night. What she didn't realize was that the real threat wasn't my rank or my past missions. It was the fact that I was finally ready to stop hiding who I had become. The next morning arrived with that soft Charleston drizzle tapping against my hotel window. I woke up at 5:47 a.m. out of pure habit. 23 years in the Navy will rewire your body clock whether you like it or not. My knee protested as I swung my legs out of bed, but I sat there for a moment, rubbing the joint through my sweatpants, breathing through the familiar ache. Marcus had texted about brunch at Emily's aunt's house. Part of me wanted to book an earlier flight and disappear back to Norfolk. But another part, the stubborn Texas girl who still lived somewhere inside the captain, refused to leave feeling chased out. So I went. The house was a beautiful white colonial with wide porches and hanging ferns. When I walked in, the conversations dipped for half a second. News had clearly traveled from the wedding. Vanessa stood near the kitchen island arranging fruit that didn't need arranging. She wore cream linen and pearls before noon, looking every bit the picture of effortless Southern grace. "Riley, so glad you made it," she said brightly, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Marcus gave me an awkward side hug that smelled like coffee and leftover wedding stress. He looked exhausted. "Coffee?" he asked, already handing me a mug. "Black, no sugar." At least he still remembered that. We eventually moved outside where ceiling fans turned lazily and kids chased a dog through the yard. For a few minutes it almost felt normal. Then Vanessa opened her mouth again. "You know," she said casually while stirring sweetener into her tea, "some people make their entire identity about their rank. It's just a lot for a wedding, don't you think?" The table went quiet. I kept buttering my biscuit, my hands steady. I've sat through worse interrogations. Vanessa smiled at Emily's aunt. "I just believe family gatherings should be about connection, not resumes." If you've ever been the target of well-mannered cruelty, the kind wrapped in smiles, and I'm just saying, you know how it slowly drains you. Each comment was a small cut. Death by 1,000 passive-aggressive remarks. I finally looked up. "Funny," I said calmly. "I always thought family was supposed to know what you actually do for a living." The porch fell silent. Vanessa's smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. "Oh, I didn't mean you specifically, Riley. You're just so private." Marcus stared down at his plate. Emily became very interested in her strawberries. General Brooks, who had arrived a little earlier, watched the exchange with quiet understanding. He didn't intervene. He knew I didn't need him to, not yet. I ate slowly, listening to the normal chatter around me. Blood pressure medication, real estate, college football. The kind of conversations I used to miss during long deployments. Now they made me feel like a visitor in my own family's life. After brunch, I slipped away for a walk in the garden. That's when I overheard Vanessa talking to one of Emily's cousins near the side door. "She showed up acting all mysterious," Vanessa whispered. "And now suddenly she's some kind of hero because an old general recognized her? Please. If she was that important, her own brother would have said something by now." I stood there for a moment with my hand against the warm brick wall, letting the words settle. They hurt. Not because they were completely false, but because they were close enough to a truth I had been avoiding. My family had never really asked, and I had never pushed them to. But something shifted in me right then. I was tired of being invisible in rooms where I should have belonged, tired of shrinking so others could feel bigger. I straightened my shoulders, took one slow breath, and walked back toward the group. General Brooks caught my eye and gave a small nod, the kind of silent military acknowledgement that says, "I see you." The rest of the day passed in a blur of polite small talk and forced smiles. Vanessa kept testing the waters with little jabs, each one more refined than the last. I answered when necessary, always calm, always measured, never giving her the explosion she seemed to want. By the time I returned to my hotel that afternoon, the rain had stopped. I sat on the bed and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, The gray strands I no longer hid as well, the quiet strength in my eyes that years of service had carved there. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. That evening's reception would be different. Not because I planned some dramatic scene, but because I had finally decided I wouldn't disappear to keep the peace anymore. If you've ever reached that quiet moment where you realize you've been dimming your light for people who were never going to see it anyway, that's where I was standing. Ready but not reckless. Calm, but no longer willing to be invisible at my own brother's wedding. The night was coming, and so was the truth. The evening reception felt heavier than the night before. The rain had cleared, leaving the harbor air warm and thick with the scent of magnolias and saltwater. Strings of soft white lights hung between the tents, reflecting gently on the dark water near Patriots Point. The band played slower songs now, and people were drinking a little more freely. But I arrived later than planned, my knee braced and my mind steady. I had spent the afternoon in my hotel room making a quiet decision. I wasn't going to start a fight, but I also wasn't going to keep folding myself smaller, just so everyone else could stay comfortable. When I walked back into the tent, General Harlan Brooks spotted me immediately. He lifted his chin in that subtle military greeting. No big wave, just recognition. He was standing with a small group of retired officers, men who carried their history in their posture and the stories behind their eyes. "Captain Reyes," he said warmly as I approached, "I was hoping you'd come back tonight." Vanessa was nearby, near the dessert table in a pale blue dress. She watched us like a hawk. Her smile was still in place, but it had grown brittle. General Brooks introduced me to the others, retired colonels and sergeants major with thick fingers, hearing aids and years of real service etched into their faces. One of them, Colonel Mercer, shook my hand and held it a second longer. "I heard about the operation in the Gulf," he said quietly. "You made a hell of a call under pressure." I felt my stomach tighten. Not many people knew the full details, but General Brooks had clearly shared just enough. If you've ever had strangers understand the weight you carry better than your own family, it's a strange kind of comfort mixed with sorrow. We talked for a while about old bases, tough deployments, and the kind of quiet pride that doesn't need loud stories. I laughed more in those 20 minutes than I had the entire weekend. For once, I didn't feel like I had to explain or downplay anything. But Vanessa couldn't let it stand. She drifted closer during a lull in the music. "Captain Reyes," she said sweetly, using my rank like it was a costume, "you must be so tired of everyone asking about work. Some of us just want to enjoy the celebration." Her words were polite on the surface, but the intent was clear. Put me back in my place. I met her eyes calmly. "Actually, I don't mind when people ask. What I mind is when they assume they already know the answer." The small group around us went quiet. General Brooks watched with quiet approval. He had seen enough power plays in his career to recognize this one. Marcus appeared beside Emily, looking nervous. He could feel the tension but still didn't fully understand it. That bothered me more than Vanessa's comments, the fact that my own brother had never asked the deeper questions. General Brooks cleared his throat. "Captain, there's something I've been meaning to tell you since last night." He lowered his voice just enough for our circle to hear, but not the entire tent. "My son Lieutenant Brooks still talks about you. He said you kept your head when the rest of the team was losing theirs. You got them out when the extraction window was closing." The words hit me harder than I expected. I remembered that night clearly, the heat, the radio static, the split-second decisions that separated life from loss. I had pushed the memory down for years the way we all do with the heavy ones. Vanessa's face changed. The color that had returned earlier drained again. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Marcus looked at me, really looked, for the first time in a long time. "You never told me any of this." I gave a small smile. "You never asked." That simple truth hung between us. General Brooks continued gently. "I didn't know you were Marcus's sister until I saw you last night. If I had, I would have made sure you were seated at our table. You deserve more than being hidden in the back." His words weren't loud, but they carried weight. Several heads turned. Emily looked embarrassed. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, a habit from childhood when he felt guilty. Vanessa tried one more time, laughing lightly. Well, let's not turn this into a military briefing. It's a wedding after all. I turned to her directly, my voice calm and even. You're right. It is a wedding. A celebration of family, which makes it the perfect place to stop pretending. The band had slowed to a soft ballad. Couples swayed on the dance floor, but our corner of the tent felt frozen in place. General Brooks placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. Not possessive, just supportive. Whenever you're ready, Captain. The floor is yours if you want it. I looked across the tent at Marcus, at Vanessa, at the family that had spent years seeing only the version of me that fit their narrative. Something inside me clicked into place. For the first time all weekend, I didn't feel the need to disappear. I nodded to the general. I think I am ready. Vanessa's expression cracked. She knew in that moment that the story she had been trying to control was about to change. And so was I. The band lowered their instruments as the wedding coordinator handed me the microphone. My palm was damp, but my voice stayed steady. I had spent years briefing rooms full of high-ranking officers under pressure. This was different, this was family. But I was done performing smallness for their comfort. I stood near the edge of the dance floor under those warm string lights, the harbor breeze brushing against my skin. A toddler cried somewhere in the back after dropping his cupcake. That small, normal sound grounded me. Well, I began, adjusting the mic slightly. I should probably warn everyone that I'm not great at wedding speeches. I'm better at briefings, and even those usually make people wish they'd stayed home. A few genuine chuckles rippled through the tent. Good. I smiled softly. I'm really happy for Marcus and Emily. I mean that. Watching my little brother build a life, a business, and now a marriage, it makes me proud. I looked directly at Marcus. He nodded, but his shoulders were tense. I took a slow breath. You spend enough time in the military, and you learn that strength doesn't always look loud or fearless. Sometimes it looks like showing up when it's hard. Sometimes it looks like carrying things in silence so other people don't have to. Vanessa shifted in her seat, her wine glass tight in her hand. Years ago, I continued calmly, Marcus called me in the middle of the night. He was scared. His company was underwater after the hailstorms. Payroll was due, the bank had frozen everything, and 15 families were counting on him. The tent grew quieter. Marcus stared down at the tablecloth. I wired him the money he needed. Not because I had extra, I didn't. But because that's what family is supposed to do when someone is drowning. You throw the rope first and figure out the rest later. I paused, letting the words settle. He paid his employees. The business survived and grew stronger. And I never asked for anything in return. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes people get so embarrassed by needing help that they turn the person who helped them into a reminder they'd rather forget. Marcus's eyes were wet when he finally looked up. Emily reached for his hand. I turned my gaze toward Vanessa. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I came to celebrate my brother. But I also came tired of being invisible in my own family. Tired of being seated in the back. Tired of whispers about how women like me never outrank anybody. Vanessa's face flushed red. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice cracking as she stood halfway up. You're turning my sister's wedding into some personal stage. I held her eyes steadily. No, Vanessa. I'm simply refusing to stay small so you can feel bigger. You decided who I was before you knew anything about me. You mocked me because my presence threatened the version of military life you built. One where women only stand beside the uniform, never wear it. General Brooks stood quietly beside his daughter. He didn't interrupt. He just watched with that calm authority. I don't need applause, I said, my voice softening. I don't need everyone here to call me captain. But I do need basic respect in my own family. And if that makes people uncomfortable, maybe it's time we got comfortable with the truth. The tent was completely silent except for the soft lapping of water against the harbor. I set the microphone down carefully. My hands were trembling now that it was over, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. Vanessa grabbed her purse, tears gathering in her eyes. So now I'm the villain, she snapped, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. She looked around, expecting support, but found mostly awkward silence. "You're not a villain," I said quietly. "You're just someone who felt threatened by a woman who chose to serve instead of stand beside someone serving. That's not on me." She walked quickly toward the exit, Emily starting to follow but stopping when Vanessa shook her head. Marcus sat frozen for several long seconds. Then he looked at me across the room, really looked like he was seeing his sister for the first time in a very long while. General Brooks squeezed my shoulder as he passed. "Well done, Captain," he said softly. "That took more courage than most operations I've seen. If you've ever had to stand up in a room where your own people should have had your back, you know how exhausting and freeing that moment feels at the same time." The music started again slowly. People began moving, whispering, processing. But something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't the quiet sister anymore. I was Captain Elena Reyes, and I had finally stopped hiding her. I slept maybe 3 hours that night. Not because I regretted what I said, but because standing up in front of your own family and finally telling the truth takes something out of you. Around 5:30 a.m. I gave up pretending. I showered, packed my suitcase, pulled on jeans and a black sweater, and braced my knee for the day ahead. The tiny hotel coffee maker sputtered out a cup that tasted faintly of plastic, but it was warm. Marcus texted at 6:05. "Can we talk before you leave?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then replied, "Lobby coffee in 20. He was already there when I came downstairs, same wrinkled shirt from the night before, hair messy, eyes tired. 2 paper cups sat on the small table between us. He pushed the black coffee toward me without asking. At least he still remembered how I take it. "Hey, Ree," he said quietly. "Hey." We sat in silence for a while, watching the lobby slowly wake up. An older couple argued softly over directions to Savannah. A little girl begged her dad for a donut. Normal life moving around us while we sat in the middle of our own reckoning. Marcus slid an envelope across the table. "It's not everything I owe you, but it's a start." Emily helped me pull it together from some of the wedding gifts. She was pretty upset I never told her about 2018. I didn't open it right away. "You didn't have to do this." "Yeah, I did." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I was ashamed, Elena. I turned that shame into distance, into resentment. You saved my company, saved my employees' families, and instead of being grateful, I made you into this reminder of the time I failed. Then I let Vanessa treat you like you were nothing." His voice cracked slightly. I watched my little brother, the one I used to make peanut butter toast for, struggle with words he probably rehearsed in the mirror. If you've ever waited years for an apology that actually felt honest, you know how heavy that moment lands. "I should have stopped her," he continued. "At the bar. At brunch. Last night. I saw the comments. I saw how she was undermining you. But I stayed quiet because it was easier. Because admitting how much you've carried for this family meant admitting I hadn't carried enough." I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. "I never needed you to be perfect, Marcus. I just needed you to see me. Not the distant sister. Not the Navy woman who chose career over family. The real me." He nodded slowly. "I see you now. Captain Elena Reyes. The woman who makes hard calls under pressure. The woman who wired $48,000 at 2 a.m. from halfway around the world without hesitation. The woman who still showed up to my wedding even though we made her feel optional." Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I didn't tell you those stories because I didn't want to make your life about my sacrifices. But staying silent taught you it was okay to forget the cost. Marcus looked down. "I'm sorry, Ertrali. I'm going to do better. Not just with money. With calls. With asking about your life. With making sure Vanessa understands that disrespecting you is a hard line." We sat there drinking bad hotel coffee while the lobby filled with departing guests. No big dramatic hugs. No promises of perfect change. Just honest, imperfect truth between two siblings who had drifted farther apart than either of us wanted. "I'm not asking you to cut Vanessa out," I said finally. "But I'm also not volunteering to be her punching bag anymore. If she wants respect, she earns it. Same as everyone else." "Understood," he replied.
No defensiveness.
Just acceptance. As I stood to leave, Marcus pulled me into a real hug this time. Not the awkward side one from the wedding. I missed you, he whispered. The real you. That nearly broke me. I hugged him back. Then don't wait for the next crisis to remember I exist. I left the hotel lobby feeling lighter, but not completely whole. Some wounds don't heal in one conversation. They heal slowly, in the quiet moments after you finally stop shrinking yourself for other people. The flight back to Norfolk was quiet. I had a window seat and watched the clouds drift below us like old memories I no longer needed to carry alone. Beside me, an older man in a faded Vietnam veteran cap slept peacefully. Across the aisle, a grandmother rubbed her swollen hands while staring out at the sky. We were all carrying something. Some of us just learned to name it. If you've ever left a family gathering feeling both exhausted and free at the same time, you understand exactly where I was on that plane. I thought about Vanessa. She wasn't evil. She was threatened. She had built her identity around being close to strength instead of becoming it herself. Seeing another woman respected in the world she admired cracked something in her. I didn't forgive her that day, but I also didn't carry her insecurity anymore. That was her work to do. Marcus started texting more after that weekend. Real check-ins. Not just how's the weather in Norfolk, but how's your knee? And tell me about your latest project if you can. Small steps, but they mattered. Emily even reached out separately to apologize for the seating chart and the way things unfolded. Progress doesn't always look perfect, but it looks honest. Back in my apartment near the base, I unpacked my suitcase and placed General Brooks's card on my desk. A simple note he had written on the back. Captain, the quiet ones who carry the weight are the ones history remembers. Don't let anyone make you forget that. I smiled as I read it again. That weekend taught me something I wish I had learned sooner. Your value doesn't decrease because someone fails to see it. Your worth isn't measured by how loudly your family celebrates you. It's measured by the life you've lived, the hard choices you've made, and the quiet strength you've protected even when no one was watching. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should love you most, hear me clearly. You don't need their permission to stand tall. You don't need a general to validate your story. But sometimes life sends those reminders anyway, to show you that you were never invisible. You were just waiting for the right moment to stop hiding. I still have the scar near my collarbone. My knee still aches after long days. I still miss holidays and birthdays because of the uniform I chose to wear. But I no longer apologize for the space I take up. I no longer dim my light so others feel brighter. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. And I finally learned which ones to close and which ones to leave open with conditions. To anyone watching this who's carrying silent sacrifices for family who never asked about the cost, I see you. I was you. And on the other side of speaking your truth calmly and clearly is a version of yourself that feels lighter, even if the road there is hard. You deserve to be known. You deserve to be respected. And most importantly, you deserve to stop disappearing in rooms where you belong. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. If it touched something in you, type boundaries in the comments. Let's remind each other that we don't have to earn our place in our own families. We already belong there. Until next time, take care of yourselves out there.